I upgraded to a helical head in this planer about 18 months ago. And 3 years ago, I did the same thing. I put a helical head in this 6-inch joiner. And in this video, I'm going to give you my long-term experiences with using them in a hobby shop. And no one's paying me for this video. Links to both videos where I did the tear down and the installation and the initial impressions can be found in the description below this video. Let's start with the joiner. This is the Delta X5 6-inch joiner. I bought it in about 2005, so it's just over 20 years old, but it is still going strong. It's been a great workhorse for me. Unfortunately, it's a 6-inch joiner, but that's about the largest that I can fit in my little basement shop. The helical head I installed is a Lux Cut III. I got mine from mywoodcutters.com and installed it in March of 2023. If I count up all the videos that I've put out since I made this upgrade, I'd say I've done about 50 projects, give or take. That's a very rough number. I don't film absolutely everything that I do in the shop, just, almost everything. But just keep in mind, I have no idea how many board feet I've pumped through this thing because, even though I'm on YouTube, this is basically a hobby shop. I'm not pushing boards through this 8 hours a day. Another thing to keep in mind is that I live in Ontario, Canada, and I mostly work with local hardwoods. So maple, walnut, cherry, Osage orange. I do occasionally work with a few exotics like bloodwood or yellow heart, but that's just little accent boards. It's primarily maple and walnut and cherry. So that's the type of wood I'm pushing through this thing. I am not putting, like, for example, high silica content exotic hardwoods from South America and so on. So over the course of those 3 years, I have yet to make any adjustments to this blade. I haven't had any real bad nicks or anything that it would have forced me to turn one of the carbide tips, but I do think I'm just about ready to do that. So let's run a board through this and let's take a close look at it, and maybe we'll do some adjustments of the carbide blades together. I have here a piece of hard maple that's about 5 3/4 inches wide, 22 inches long. I wanted to demonstrate a full width cut, which is why I picked a board that's this wide. So we're using the full capacity of the joiner here. I took 2 passes, and I'll show the depth of cut gauge here for a moment. It's not a super deep cut, but this board was flat enough that it really didn't need that. I do have the volume muted a bit to spare your ears, but I hope you can hear that the motor is not really at all overloaded. It's handling the cut with this helical head just fine. So then after joining the face of the board, I turned it 90 degrees and I jointed the narrow edge as well. Again, I'm taking 2 passes here. This is actually a fairly figured piece of maple, so it's a great test, but it is a beautifully smooth finish. However, there is one little groove. I don't know if I can even get it on camera. I can feel it right here. There's just a tiny little raised bit. Yeah, I was trying and I can't see it on camera, but if I just run a pencil along it, you can just see it shows up with that little line there. That's, yeah, I mean, this would sand right out. It's no big deal, but it is a little nick in one of the blades. And I forgot which way I had the board oriented when I made the first cut, so I quickly took it to the joiner and I ran it over the joiner one more time so I could keep track of which side of the blade has the nick in it. Well, let's make sure it's unplugged. So I had the board oriented like this, so let's flip it over and take a look at things. And again, it's really hard to see on camera. I'm trying it with my cell phone. You see this little pale line, that is the little nick. Down at this end of the board, you can see it too. If it catches the light just right, there's that little nick. But anyways, you can definitely feel it with your hands. So I drew on it with the pencil again just to make it more visible. The main point is that I can follow this line down to the head and I can see that this is the carbide blade that's got the nick in it. 1, 2, 3, the third one over. And let's see if I rotate this. Again, be careful of these blades. Here there's a gap. So this is where I have a choice to make. I could rotate all of the carbide knives on the cutter head, or I could just rotate the ones that have the nick. If it was wearing out or getting rough, I would just rotate all of them, but there's only a nick in one spot, so I'm just going to rotate the heads where it has the nick. So the carbide blades are marked so that so you know how they're oriented. And now my little carbide blades are going to get out of sync. They're not all going to be the same, but that's just something I'm going to live with because it seems wasteful to me to turn all of them when it is still producing a really good cut. I'm just going to rotate the 3 or 4 carbide blades that are affected. So this is the Torx tool that came with the set. Just loosen the blade. And I want to make sure there's no dust underneath there. I'm going to get a little rag and make sure I really wipe the bed well. I'm going to go clockwise, so the little 0 was down on the one corner. Turn it clockwise, place it back down. And secure it. I have a torque wrench and I've set it to about 5.5 Newton meters, or about 45 inch-pounds. And that looks good. And then let me turn it and I'll do the next one. For this third one, I moved the camera around to see if we can give a better view. But hopefully my tools are not getting in the way. Just wiping it off to make sure there's no debris. Wiping off the blade. Turning it 90 degrees. Putting it back into place. And again, torquing it. And there we go. And this last one, oops, that's a bit sharp. For this last section of the blade, I'm not actually going to do anything because here it appears that the line falls right in between these two. So I am not going to rotate anyone in this 4th row at all. So fingers crossed, everything is now back to where it should be. Let's get it plugged back in and run another test cut as soon as I find my hearing protection. Here it is. And here's the end results. And again, I know it's really hard to see, but my fingers are telling me that it is perfectly flat. And yeah, this is a fairly figured piece of maple with a lovely surface. So after 3 years of use, which for me was, like I said, a little over 50 projects built, I just had a tiny nick on 3 of those carbide cutters, which, we just fixed by rotating them, which, you saw how easy that was. All the other cutters, and there's 25 other cutting heads in there, are still on their first cutting face, and I'm still getting a really good cut quality. At this rate, I think I should get 10 years out of that carbide head, at least, fingers crossed. Now for a few other final thoughts, sort of wrapping up my opinion of having, this joiner upgrade in here for the last 3 years. In terms of the motor usage, I think you saw in the clips that we did that I don't really notice the motor laboring or bogging down. I've certainly never popped a breaker and, that's putting, full width boards through it that sort of are at capacity. It wasn't slowing me down at all. I don't notice that I have to push any slower or anything. So it just works like the joiner always works. In summary, the only real difference I notice is the improved cut quality. Well, that and how easy it is to, change and adjust the blades as you saw. So that's my 3-year review of the Lux Cut III helical head upgrade for a Delta 6-inch joiner. I love it and I'm really happy with the upgrade. Now let's talk about the planer upgrade. This, of course, is the very common DeWalt DW735 planer, 13-inch planer. Mine happens to be very old because I bought it back in 2005, 2006. So it's also 20 years old like my joiner. To be specific, mine is the Type 1 DeWalt DW735. From reading online, it seems like there's two types. There's the Type 1 and the Type 12. The Type 1 is supposedly made in Taiwan. The Type 12 is made in China, and they don't have the same parts between them. Adding to the confusion though, from what I've seen online, when it's labeled Type 1, it should also say made in Taiwan in the nameplate or made in China. And my nameplate says nothing. So maybe back in 2005, they only had one factory where they were making these and they didn't feel the need to put it on there. I don't know. I assume that I've got the Taiwanese made one, but all I can really say is it's labeled Type 1. And it's 20 years old, like I said. The helical head that I installed is from a company called FindBuyTool, and I installed it in about August of 2004, so it's almost exactly 18 months old. And just a quick reminder, if you want to see the video where I did the teardown and the installation of the head and the preliminary testing, I'll have links to that in the video description down below. Like I did with the joiner, I scrolled back through my YouTube video library, and by my count, I've done roughly 25 projects since I upgraded this machine. And at least 25, that's what I've made videos of. But like with the joiner, I really have no idea how much board foot I've pushed through this. And like I said with the joiner, I live in Ontario, Canada, and I mostly work with domestic hardwoods like cherry, walnut, maple, the occasional Osage orange, and some spruce every now and then, but very rarely do I put exotics through there like, high silica content stuff from South America and so on. I did recently get a nick in one of the 54 carbide cutters, and I rotated that to a fresh edge. I filmed that at the time for Instagram, and I'll share some of those clips now. Just be aware that that's vertical footage. So a year ago, I did this conversion of my planer to a helical head. And I was just planing some cherry today, and I noticed what appears to be a line here. It's not easy to get. Let's see if I can get it at an angle. Right there, I can feel it under my finger. There's a little ridge there. So I wonder if one of the knives has gotten a nick in it. So I've opened it up. So I measured, and the line is 2 5/8 inches from the side of the board. So if I go over to the planer, I'm measuring from the edge. Anyways, it's this third one. Some of them, like you'll notice, the blades are in a different position. So some of them just don't line up, but I'm having a hard time because I'm not seeing a real visible nick. Take the screw out and take the blade out, and I can take a closer look at the blade, and I don't know if I can get it there. I think somewhere right there, I'm just seeing, right about there, I'm just seeing what looks like it could be a nick. It's very, very not much of one. So I used a rag, and I really cleaned off the surface, because it's one of the things I've read is you have to be absolutely sure there's no debris underneath your blade. And then I'm taking this one, and now I will be turning it 90 degrees so that there's a new cutting surface. This is the old cutting surface, and I've turned it so there's a fresh cutting surface showing. I then used my little torque wrench, and I torqued it down to 6 Newton meters, and now let's button it up and give it a try. Okay, and I've run this a few more times on both sides, and again it was 2 5/8 from the left, and my fingernails are not feeling anything, my fingers are not feeling anything. It was really hard to see on camera anyways, but I hope you can see that that's looking good. Flip it over, and there we go. So that Instagram clip was me rotating one of the carbide cutters in my planer, and that was about a month or two ago. But that's the only adjustments I've made in the past 18 months. So now let's run a test board through it. This is that same piece of figured maple that I ran through the jointer earlier, so it's 5 3/4 inches wide. Let's just call it 6 inches wide, and just a hair under 2 feet long. So that was 2 passes, turning the handle a half turn in between, and I was running at the dimensioning speed of 96 cuts per inch. And this is a beautiful finish. This board was pretty flat to begin with, so there wasn't really that much to take down. So 18 months of use in a hobby shop, 25 projects have been pumped through that, figured maple, and I am getting a beautiful, beautiful finish on this board. So if you've been looking into helical heads for portable planers, reading on the internet, you might have noticed there's a little bit of controversy going around about whether it's overloading these machines. So yes, I've had people ask me, do you need to take a lighter cut when since you're putting an increased load on the motor? And to that I say, only a little bit. Before I got this upgrade, I would typically, when I'm planing wood, I'm not really in a rush. So I'd be doing usually a half turn at a time, which the manual tells me is a 32nd of an inch. Now, sometimes I might do a full turn or maybe 3/4 of a turn, but typically I would do a half turn. And at first, after I did the upgrade, I was doing, say, a 1/3 of a turn. I was just being very cautious. But over time, I guess I just got more comfortable with how it was performing, and I'm just sort of back into my standard taking a half turn of the wheel each time I push the board through, which you saw me do with that piece of figured maple. Speaking of which, this has a 13-inch capacity, but most of the boards that I'm dealing with are sort of in the 5-inch wide. That sort of is your common board that I'm getting. It's kind of rare that you're getting an 8 or a 12-inch wide board. At least that's not what I'm finding in the lumber yards. And if I'm doing a 12-inch wide board, I'm going to take a lighter cut. But I was going to do that anyway, even before I did the upgrade. Back to the issue of the motor. I've heard some people have had issues with their motor not being powerful enough. John from Lincoln Straight Woodworking in particular, I saw a couple of clips where he talked about how his motor was just popping and popping and popping the breaker over and over again. And so he has not been happy with the helical upgrade in his DeWalt planer. But it just hasn't happened to me. If I think back over the 18 months, I can only think of maybe once when I blew the circuit breaker and I was feeding a 13-inch wide board through, and I'd made the mistake of just taking too deep of a cut. And actually, no, I'm wrong. I think I did it twice, but the other time was one of these times where the board was not even from this end to this end. So I'd set the planer based on this depth, but the board got thicker at this end. So it jammed underneath the planer, but that has nothing to do with it being a helical head. That has to do with me misjudging the thickness of the board. So I don't want to discount other people's experiences. I can only tell you about my experiences. And this might come back to the fact that this is a 20-year-old machine. Were they using different motors in the early days of making the DeWalt? Is it that I've got a Type 1 versus a Type 12? I don't know. So to sum up, I am still very happy with this upgrade. I'm really glad that I did it. I'm really happy to no longer be swapping out disposable blades every 6 to 12 months. After 18 months of use, I've only had 1 carbide cutter that I've had to rotate. So I still have 3 unused surfaces on almost all of the carbide cutters that are on the head. But I also acknowledge that this does not seem to be universal. Like, there are people out there who have legitimate complaints about their helical upgrade. It would be nice if we could narrow that down. If we could do a study, is it, young machines versus old machines? Is it Type 1 versus Type 12 or something? I can't do that. So all I can tell you is that on my 20-year-old Type 1 DeWalt, it's been in a hobbyist shop where I'm not pumping boards through it 8 hours a day. I'm really happy with it. I think the results are really great. I'm getting great finish. I'm really happy with not having to change blades. And I'm starting to repeat myself, so let's just cut it short there. I'm really happy with it. And I think that's it for now. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you learned something. We'll see you on the next one.